Thank you so much for having me. I'm still able to be doing this, and I want to answer as many questions I can, and I'm just so happy to be here. I want to acknowledge my former boss, Larry Henney. Larry and Elaine, will you please stand? Larry lives and Elaine live in Hollywood, and I worked for him at the Lorraine State Bank for 20 years. The best boss I ever had. Don't tell him. And Glennis and the Musselwhites. Bernard and Glennis, will you please stand? Glennis was...
And her daughter?
Oh, absolutely. Glennis was very much involved in me getting the Daughters of American Revolution. Look at my medal. I've got the Medal of Honor, which I am so proud of. Thank you. Now I'd like to have some questions from you.
Well, I was handed questions, so I will start with some of the questions the audience has asked. Leon's first cousin married Margaret. Is he still living, or is she still living?
Yes, Margaret is still living. She's at the assisted living in Ellsworth, and I go see her a couple times a week, and she's 90. So I go visit her, and she asks lots of questions, and some of it I have to repeat, but that's okay. I'm glad to do it. She told her daughter the other day that Mildred is the mother hen. Because I've told her to do something. She was supposed to be keeping her feet up so her ankles don't swell. So I got there and I said, Margaret, you don't have your feet up. And she says, oh, I don't need to. I says, yes, you do. And so I'm the old mother hen. But that's okay. But I'm glad to have her close by. She was in Hutchinson in assisted living for 2.5 years. And now she's in Ellsworth, where I live, so I can see her.
Next
you
question.
Know what?
What?
I just know I've got somebody else here. Ruth, will you please stand? Ruth Plays and daughter Karen. Will you please stand? A good friend of mine. Karen helped take care of Ruth when she was in Ellsworth. And I'm so glad to see you. I just now saw you. I will come to see you again.
Next question. Where is Mutti buried?
In a Great Bend cemetery. She said, my aunt and uncle Charlie, we bought a lot for her there next to him. She says, I want to be buried next to Uncle Charlie and Tante Anna because I don't want to be stuck somewhere in a corner. As if that would make any difference.
Next question. Carl Robert Dobrinsky. Do you know if he is related to Lenora Dobrinsky? I went to college with Lenora at McPherson College. Somebody did.
It's Leora, I think.
Leora? Sorry.
Leora, yes. Leora is the youngest sister.
Of Carl?
Of Carl, yes.
Next question. I enjoyed reading your book. It definitely held my interest. In it, I saw and felt sadness, but also faith, hope, family, love, resilience, and unbelievable tenacity and creativity. Growing up, what do you attribute in nurturing these strengths?
My mom, mainly. She was my dad was, of course, always busy. We farmed with horses, so he was always busy. It was my mom. I contribute to learning. We had to work. We were out in the fields with them, and then you saw if you read the book, I wasn't in a field. I was probably 10 years old, and Nazi man that was living in our town. He came in his brown uniform, and he said to me, "Little girl, feed the chickens." You read that in the book. And I said, "We don't feed the chickens in the middle of the day. We feed them when they go at nighttime. We call them. They're running all over the farm, and you go put, and you throw the feed out there for them." And that was my job to do that. And he says, "I want you to do it now." I know what he was doing. He was trying to count the chickens. They were running because we had to give so many eggs per chicken to the government. So that's what he was doing. He was counting the chickens as they were coming to eat. And I didn't know that. And my dad was very unhappy about that. They did that to a child. So.
Next question. Tell us about your Christmases. Were they like before the Nazi time, during the Nazi time, after the Nazi time, and until you came to America?
Yes, they were about the same. We have candles on our tree, so about a dozen. Because if you have to have candles, little candles on a tree, you had to watch. There is Vivian. I don't believe this. I'm seeing more people than I know. I worked with Vivian at the bank. Now I'm getting all mixed up.
Christmas.
Okay.
Christmas.
I'm old. Remember, I'm 93, so you just have to take this. Yes, we had candles, and my dad would be watching the candles on a tree because they were clipped on. I still got a couple of those that I put on my Christmas tree every year. You clip them on and have a little white candle, and you clip them on, and my dad was, of course, watching because that they didn't catch fire. And that was our celebration all along, so till I came here. You need your glasses.
How did your mother and brother escape East Germany?
After the wall came down is when they finally got to come. They couldn't come. We waited and waited for them to come. But the wall had to come down for them to be able to come. And Leon and I waited to get married because we thought it'd be nice if they would be here. And we got married, and we waited a little over a year. And they, all at once, we were married 6 months. And then I got a call, we are in Canada. They had a strike in New York, and the ship couldn't land in New York, so they had to go to Canada, and they came from Canada. And that was a surprise. And that's the picture on front of the book when we picked him up at the Hutchison station. That's the picture when I first saw him. After 7 years, I got to see him.
What is a Volkssturm portrait?
Volkssturm portrait. That was my dad, where you saw him in a uniform in a book. I never did see that uniform at our house. I don't know if they kept it someplace, but that is, what is it in English?
The National Guard.
National Guard is what my dad was in the National Guard. And he was called in at the last, when the Russians were here, he was called in and he came home for 3 days. He was home 3 days. And during those 3 days that he was home on leave, the Russians came. So he could not get back to his unit. So he was home when the Russians came into our home. But it's like the National Guard.
What happened to your brother Horst?
What happened to my brother Horst? Well, he came over here with my mother. I tell you a sad story, though. My brother would never talk about his children. Ask him, he has 3 boys and a girl, and his children ask him a question, something about when he was growing up, and he would kind of change the subject. After the Russians came, a couple days after they came, there were 4 young boys, 12 and 13 years old. He was 13, and a couple of the boys were 12. They were standing and talking, and a Russian soldier came up and shot one of the boys. And my brother standing right there, it could have been him. They were looking for a Hitler Youth. The boy they shot was the brother of the Hitler Youth. Well, Hitler Youth is like Boy Scout, only that they had to wear a swastika around their arm. They had an armband. And they got this boy that they shot by mistake. It was his brother. And my brother stood right there, and he saw this. And why would you want to talk about this? So he was just at an age when he was very, very upset and never talked about. I did not know about this till we went back to Germany to visit, and this young man that was standing next to them told me about it. My brother never did tell me. It was just something he didn't want to talk about. Then, as the Russians came in, we had 2 hours to get our things together to leave. They gave us exactly 2 hours to leave. So what would you take if someone tells you to leave in 2 hours? We didn't take a picture book. We took some clothes, and food. And then we went along. It was like a caravan. When I saw the Ukraine pictures, here at least they were going out. We were driving out. They were on both sides of us, down the road. Go, go. And it was February, first part of February. It was very cold. And we had grandparents with us. And of course, some of them died. They laid them in a ditch, covered them with a coat or a blanket, and they would say, go, go, with the guns. They would shove the relatives along. And babies, we saw babies die. They didn't make it in the cold. And they were buried the same way, just laid them in a ditch and say, go. So, and those are the kind of things my brother wanted to shut out. He just did not talk about that. And so my children, his children said his granddaughter is a freshman at K-State, and she said, Aunt Mildred, I want to know more about my grandpa, that'd be my brother. And so I decided then I've got to write this down for her too. I just wanted to write it down for my grandchildren, but his grandchildren needed to know too. And that's how it came that I put it down. So
that leads us to the next question. Describe your writing process as an act of collaboration with Sherry. You want to talk a little bit about how that all happened?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. It was a cousin of Leon's second cousin. She would say to me in church, Mildred, you got to write this down. You got to write this down. We've got to make a book out of this. I said, no, I'm not going to do this. She went to Germany for the Sound of Music, and there she met Sherry Green, the lady that wrote the book. Her mom took her over there because she had just finished her master's, and that trip was a present to her for finishing her master's. So I finally decided, okay, let her come. So she came, and she she sat on one side of the dining room table and I sat on the other side, and she would just ask questions. She was so kind. She was the same age as Susan, and I said, "You could be one of my daughters." She never pressured me. She just kept writing. Just ask a question, wrote it down, and that's how it all got started.
Do you see similarities of your Russian army experience to what is currently happening in Ukraine?
Yes. That was a very sad day for me. The day that they went to the Ukraine, I cried, and I'm crying again. But I could just see those people. I saw the old people walking. They're not going to go very much farther before they can't go anymore. But the only thing, we were shoved out while they were going voluntarily. So yes, I could see. Not same things. It was 77 years ago, January 1st, that happened to me. I was 15 years old.
How to help and solve Ukrainian refugee situation? I don't know that we have the answer to that tonight.
I have made some donations to an organization that's helping them, and I will continue to do that. That's all I can do from here.
And pray.
Yeah, absolutely, and pray every day for those people.
Please tell the story of how your mother disguised you to save you. That's a good one.
That's a good one. Every morning when we got up, my mother would put lard on my neck. She must heat it a little bit. She smeared the lard on my neck, put a rag real tight around it, put flour on I had rosy cheeks. They probably are rosy right now because I'm warm. But if you put flour on your face, you look pretty pathetic. And so I had flour on my face, a lard on my neck, and I could not turn my neck just like this. And the soldiers would come in and look at me and they say, "She's sick." Thank you, Lord. That was my mother's idea. I said, I wondered if I could have done that for my girls. I have 2 daughters. I wondered if I would have thought. She was 47 at the time. My dad was 46 when the Russians came. And that's what she did every day. The day that they came in, they got me to go to the laundry, is the day that she hadn't made me up yet. They looked at me and said, "You go wash." And they loaded us in a wagon, 10 men, about 20 ladies and girls, and they took us to another town. And I did not know one person in that group. They were all from all different towns. And they took us to the town, no civilians in the town. Our towns are just a mile or mile and a half apart because we walk or go by bicycle. Towns aren't very far apart. But we've never been in that town we had moved 5 or 6 different times already from our hometown to different towns. You slept either in someone's house or in a barn or wherever there was a place you would find to sleep is where we slept. And he came in and said, "You wash." So they loaded us up, took us to this different town. We stayed in a place, and it was like bunk beds here and up here. The boards were nailed against the wall and had straw on it. And that straw was about 2 inches, about like this. But that's 2 inches. And So in about 4 or 5 days, started scratching. We had lice. Someone else had been there, and they wore the people out, and then they get a new crew, and we were the new crew, and they let the others go home. We're supposed to wash 75 shirts in one day. I've never washed a shirt on a wash. These were wooden washboards. I'm trying to find something that is as sharp as those were. They were brand new and they were wood. And you run your hands down with the shirts that you were washing. And on the third day, I had no skin left. And they did not know any of our names because they line us up in a line and they would say, you wash. And I looked at my hands. It was a Russian soldier. I looked at a lady. I looked at my hands and I said to her, I stepped out and I said, look at my hands. I couldn't sleep all night because it's just like when you have a burn. It was throbbing. Look at my hands. I'm not going to wash anymore. And I shook my head like that. And they had warned us, if we refused to wash or any work, they shoot us. And so I thought, my dad was gone. They had taken him. He didn't come back. I don't know if my mother and brother are still alive, so what? It doesn't matter. So, and she pushed me back in a line and took the next girl. Her hands were just as bad, but she didn't speak up. I got to go out and plant potatoes. Well, I have done that since I was 8 years old. Go out and plant potatoes. And we were there about 3 weeks, and then they said, go. They didn't take us back where they got us from. So 4 of us girls said, well, let's go back where we came from. Well, which direction did we come from? We are forced, we unfamiliar places. So we went to the town that we came from. We got to the first house. No civilians in here. Now where do we go? I had no clue which direction. And we went one direction, and praise the Lord, I found my mom in the next town cooking over an open fire. And she was this far away, as far as you are, from me. And she said, Mildred, you're dirty and you got lice. 3 weeks. You had the same clothes on. You slept on straw. My hair was long and no combs, so you just go like this. And how we had to wash was a trough in front of with a guard standing right there with a gun. And there was a trough of water and a pump, and you were cleaned up from here and here. I was clean. The rest of me was not, I'm sure, after 3 weeks. So my mother said, and she said, and you know you got lice, and how did she know? I'm this far away from her. So she said, you stay right here. I'm going to heat you some water. Go in that little shed. There was a little wood shed there. And I bring you some clothes of my brother's and heat you some water so you can clean up. But you got to spend the night in there. You can't come in because there's 30 of us sleeping in one room, all refugees. And we don't want lice. So she put vinegar on my head, put a rag real tight around it, and I got cleaned up, put my brother's clothes on. The next morning, she combed, but I said, I got to take it off. They're running like crazy up there. I got to take this off. And she said, no, 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 you got to keep it on. But it didn't feel good. And so next morning, she combed it all out, and then I could go up and sleep with the rest of them. We were cramped, one more person in that. There were 30 people in that one room. They were all refugees. We were there just a few days, and then they told us we could go back home. So we decided we'd go back home. When we got home, there was a big hole in the roof of the house. There was no furniture. They had made a laundry out of our home. The floors, the hardwood floors, had holes drilled in them where you pour the water in, and you just throw it out, made a hole on the outside of the house, just throw it out like that. They made a laundry out of our home, just like what I had worked in. So, but we found my birth certificate. I have to tell you about that. My dad buried a bag with my birth certificate, their marriage certificate, some jewelry, money, which was no good because it was just like play money now. And all the basement was brick, the floor. And they had dug up all the bricks but tan. And the very first brick that my mother lifted, there was the bag. They had been called away for some reason. They would have dug up the rest of it, but something kept them. The Lord did it. He did. 16. My birthday is in March, and the Russians came in February, 1st of February. The lady that wrote the book said, "Did you have a party?" I didn't even know when my birthday was. We knew it was daylight and night. We had no calendar. We didn't know if it was Monday or Sunday or what day it was. I did not know when my 16th birthday was.
When you reflect on your time with the Nazis and the Russians, which was more fearful for you?
For me, the Russians. For me, the Russians, because the Nazis, we just did what they wanted us to. I mean, we could. My mother and dad did not believe. My dad was here 8 years, and my mother 4 or 5 years. And my dad did not like Hitler. And all we had was radios. So when they attempted on Hitler's life 3 times, I think, and all we had was a radio, and my dad came in, and he was bent over, listened to the radio, and all I could remember him saying, "They missed him again, they missed him again." He wanted him to get rid of, because we had to give so many. The milk, I remember my mom skimming off some of the cream off the milk before we had to give them up. So we had some. We could keep some, but not enough to. But she saw to it we had a little extra cream. She skimmed it off the cans before we sent it on. But it was not, he was, as children, we did not know much. Our folks kept things from us. And of course, the radio, that was mainly from Mother and Dad. We didn't have much there. So we didn't really know much going on. But when the Russians came, that was hard. When they walked in the door, Hitler made the propaganda. He told us, the Russians have just old men and boys left. When the fighting troops came in, they couldn't even get through the door. They were 6 foot plus. They were tall, like Vivian's husband. They were tall, or Larry. They were tall, and there were none under 20 and none over 30. Those were the fighting troops. And I'm still seeing that first soldier coming through that door. And they had smallpox marks on their faces. So they must have had an epidemic because they had smallpox marks, quite a few of the soldiers, so there must have been an epidemic. And they looked so stern. Of course, we were so scared. We were under the table, we were hiding. We had gone to town. We lived a quarter of a mile outside of town. We had gone to town to be, my dad says, be with more people. We went with some relatives, we stayed. So there were about 3-4 families together. My dad said, we've got to go home and milk the cows that day before the Russians came. So my mother, my dad, our Polish boy, and a girl that lived with us, the 4 went out and they left the 2 of us in town to milk. And the Russians hadn't come yet, so they went out to milk, and they were to come back that evening. The Russians came during the night, no mother and dad. They didn't come back. By morning, they still weren't there. So my brother and I decided, well, we're going to go out and find mother and dad, and Jan and Alma. And so we're going out. It's a blacktop road. The roads aren't as wide as blacktop. They went by our house as here because we just go by bicycle, walk, or horse and buggy. And here we're walking along, and all at once here comes a tank, a Russian tank, and soldiers laying on it with their guns. And here are 2 kids walking, 16 and 14 walking. And so we went way in a ditch, and we were both scared. We didn't know. And it's because we were halfway out to our house. And they just went on by. They were fighting troops. They just went on by, didn't pay attention to us. We went on, big hole in the roof of the house when we got there. But we went on inside. Our house is like this, the barns and all like this. We went inside there, and they were following my dad around. About 4 to 6 soldiers were out there with them. And my mother was in the kitchen, and I had taken my coat off and laid it in a bedroom. And she said, where'd you put your coat? And I said, I laid it in the bedroom. She says, you better go get it. There are soldiers in and out and coming out with stuff, taking stuff. And so I'm walking in this door, and he walks out of this door with my coat. Well, you don't say, give me my coat back. So I had another old coat from my brother that I wear. You wear whatever you have. And some of it wasn't very good. But they took whatever they wanted. They just went in, took things. And what disturbed my mother most, when they were standing there shooting the chickens and the ducks and the geese, they were just shooting them just for the fun of it. And that was all hard work for her, to raise. But I got to thinking, just not very long ago, I thought, wonder what happened to our hogs. The cattle they took out, but the hogs were in the sheds. So I don't know what happened then. I hope they turned them loose. They would have starved. Surely they did. But best if they would have killed them too. I don't know. We walked by, in a couple of days, we walked by our house. We stayed with people in town. We didn't stay there because there was soldiers all around. And we had a big police dog. It was like a guard dog. And he was tied up, and at night we turned him loose, and he'd be inside the buildings. I had gates, so he stayed inside. And as we walked by, the soldier had him on a chain, and he had his head down. We knew he must have got mistreated because he didn't look like our dog, and my mom was so sad about that. Then she had a little electric oven. We we have wood and coal is how we heat our stoves. But this was electric, was a little oven. You could get a sheet, a baking sheet, and she would make Streuselkuchen in the sheet. She was so proud of that little electric oven. When we walked by, it sat outside all beat up. And of course, that made her sad. Here is her special, what was special to her, that was all beat up and wasn't any good anymore. So.
Tell about the molasses and feathers.
Oh, the sugar beets, and we make molasses out of that, and that's a lot of work. So the Russian soldiers took the big can of molasses, poured it down the stairs, from upstairs, poured it down the stairs, ripped the feather bed open and put feathers in it. Can you imagine? And my mother had to see all that, so.
Last question. Some of your first impressions when you moved to Kansas as a teen, or share some of your first impressions when you moved to Kansas as a teen. And what did you enjoy about high school?
Oh. Well, that first year in high school, let me tell, well, I worked in a diet kitchen. My aunt and uncle, I came to my aunt and uncle. If you have read the book, Tante Anna and Uncle Charlie and Margaret, I came to them because that's who my mom and dad lived with when they were here. And Margaret couldn't talk German. I couldn't talk English, and she shared her bedroom with me. She had a drawer for me, 2 drawers. I didn't need 2 drawers. I had enough for 1 drawer. You saw my suitcase over there. There wasn't much there. Let me see. Oh, yes, and I said my aunt and uncle would talk German to me. I said to my aunt, I need to get a job where I can do the work and not have to talk. So if I don't have to talk and still I can do my job. So she found a job for me at the diet kitchen in Great Bend Hospital. And one of the girls had to go early in the morning, 5 o'clock, and do section the grapefruit. So it was my morning to be down there by myself. They told me what to do, and I didn't have to talk to anybody. I can do my job. And I was doing this, and the phone rang. What am I going to do? So I answered the phone, and it was about 5 minutes, and a sister was down in the diet kitchen. She wanted to know what was going on down there. And she showed me what she wanted, and we got her tray ready. And she wished me well, and she had a nurse with her that could talk German. And she said, and you learn English, and you're doing a good job, but just learn English. And I told her, I'm trying. And this nurse went to high school at Lorraine and graduated from Lorraine High School. And she says, come to my apartment and we talk German. Oh, I was so happy to get to talk to somebody. All day long I couldn't talk or understand what they were saying. So I went over there and she said to me, the second or third visit, would you like to go to high school? And I says, I have to start in the 1st grade. I can't speak English. And she said, she got hold of a lady that was her English teacher at Lorraine when she graduated from Lorraine High School. And that's the Dobrinsky family that's in the book. That's who I stayed with for 4 years. They had a daughter, 4 years old, and a son, 2. And while I was there, they had 2 more boys. But she sewed for me, she helped me. But my freshman year was terrible in high school. Can you imagine when you don't understand what the teacher is saying? I would come home and I said, I'm not going back, it's too hard. The next morning I was ready to go back again. I wanted to learn English. And the first year was tough. But the second year went better. Third year I was in plays and I graduated. I started high school when I was 18 and I graduated when I was 22. I made it!
What did you enjoy most about high school here?
Oh. I want to tell you something what the boys did to me. You know, when you're just learning, we always had good teams. And they had this big chart laying there. It could have been my sophomore year. I don't know, freshman. Had this big chart, and they were going to tournament to the state. And there was Claflin, Holyrood, Bushton, Lorraine, and Bye. B-Y-E. And I'm looking at this, they're all looking at this and talking, and I said, I feel so bad for that little town of Bye. I didn't know that wasn't a town. So those are the kind of things. And then Leon took me one time to speak to one of the, it was in high school for another high school. They wanted me to come speak, Kayetz, I think it was. And there comes, we meet this truck. As we were going, we meet the truck. And this says P-I-E. And the smoke was coming out of the top, out of the exhaust. And he says, see, that's where they're baking the pies. Well, how did I know? Those are just some of the things that was a hard way of learning, but I did it. Yes.
In the book, in many places, you reference how God provided for you. Share some of those.
He did. He did. I find my mom sitting in a corner praying. The Russians said no guns and no Bibles. So we didn't have a Bible. Of course, the guns were buried anyway. But we had no Bible. So the things, we knew the songs, we would sing hymns that we had memorized, and my mother, she'd be sitting in a corner praying. I believe my mom was the force that kept us together and kept us going and kept us safe. And the Lord. He was with me every inch of the way, otherwise I would not be here.
You want to say a thank you to everybody?
Yes, yes.
Maybe something in German, and then...
Oh, ja. Oh, vielen Dank, dass ich hierher kommen konnte. Many thanks that I could come here. And I want to leave you with one thing. I know who holds tomorrow, and I know who holds my hand. And I thank God for that. Thank you so much for having me.